This is the Jedburgh podcast. I'm the creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Each episode, I speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, and those dedicated to winning, no matter the challenge. The Jedburgh podcast is founded in the lineage of the special operations Jedburgh teams of the past and is produced in partnership with Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm focused on helping you optimize the people side of your business. We're sponsored by Jersey Mike's Subs. Together, we share the mission of giving, making a difference in someone's life. Visit the Jedburgh podcast, Talent War Group, and Jersey Mike's Subs on the web and on social media. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation.
Oftentimes, I'm trying to constrain the environment so I don't have to make another choice. So here's a simple idea. Don't want to eat cookies late at night? Don't have cookies in the house.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Yep. You want to smash a bunch of cookies? Make sure there are a bunch of cookies in the house. I guarantee you at 2 in the morning, you'll wake up and be like, wow, I might as well have a cookie.
Right. The tagline of the Jedburgh podcast is how you prepare today determines success tomorrow. It's a simple phrase, but it's something that we can apply to almost anything we do in our lives, and it's something we spend a lot of time talking about with our guests. We can't fake preparation. Eventually, if we don't put the work in, if we don't prepare ourselves for everything that we set out to do, we'll be exposed. The results that we expect won't be there. It will show. Mobility is one of those areas where preparation can't be faked. It can't be shortcutted. When I was down at Sandlot Jax in the GORUCK Games, I had a chance to sit down with Dr. Kelly Starrett, co-founder of the Ready State, best-selling author, and physical trainer for many of the most elite athletes in professional and Olympic sports. Kelly joined me in the back of the Land Rover ambulance for a conversation on movement, mobility, and human performance. We compared mobility versus stretching. We spoke about the importance of sleep. And most importantly, we defined how the goal of every human should be to perform basic movements without pain or limitation. And finally, Kelly puts me on the spot by testing my knowledge of mobility. But that's okay because I forced him to define the term Supple Leopard. Check out our videos and pictures from this episode and the entire Sandlot event on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Find all our episodes on our website, jedburghpodcast.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you there. Kelly, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast.
Total pleasure. And before we get into this, does the inside of this smell like Vietnam or Korea?
No, it smells like World War II.
Okay, just so we're clear. So I'm more like on the inside of a J.D. Salinger novel. That's where I'm talking to you from. It's great.
Yeah, we are inside the World War II Land Rover Defender ambulance. Jaguar Land Rover of Fairfield, Connecticut has graciously allowed us to tow it down, me to put it on a flatbed and tow it down here behind my truck, 17 hours straight. We're partnered with the Readiness Collective out of Norwalk as well, and they have jumped in on this thing. I could not be more excited about the support that
if I had been a 14-year-old boy, I would have lived in here. I just would have, like, this would be my bedroom, hang out. I mean, this is pretty dope.
Well, we had Travis Wilson from Alpha Elite Performance came in. We had him for a little bit, and he was like, this isn't the first time I've been in the back of an FLA with a bunch of dudes.
I'm right back at home. This is perfect.
Yeah. So that was great. But I appreciate you taking some time, coming in here, talk about the Ready State, talk about your work in mobility, and really start talking about what is mobility and what's the difference between mobility and stretching and how does it affect our lives and how does it affect our longevity. I mean, we were just sitting here and I was giving you a little bit of my background, and you said you got a lot of miles being 13 years in the Special Forces, and I know the first thing you're thinking is, do I have mobility? And the answer is no. I do not.
What I think is you're a perfect expression of your environment. That's what I think, right? And we end up valuing everyone comes from somewhere, and think about how many eggs we've broken to find a few good dozen. We didn't need to break as many eggs. And it wasn't very long ago that our model was work really hard, break, take some time off, we'll see if we get further next time. And that model got us a lot of success. What we realized is that, especially as we really kind of, people talk about longevity, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, rich tech dudes, filtering their blood? Is that what you mean?
Like Tom Brady.
Right. The rest of us is, how do we come out unharmed or less unharmed, and really with the view of being 100? How do we be durable and reflect that in the realities of being a warfighter potentially, or being in a community where you don't sleep, you don't have access to good nutrition, you're a stressed animal, and what are the best practices? How do we mitigate that? So if 80% of Marine Force Recon retire in full disability, I don't know were you retire in disability or not on the scale.
Yeah, I'm at 90 and
just 90, perfect, just piece of cake, just 90% disabled.
Yeah, that's it.
What if we started with the assumption that we can't prevent that, but what if we can say, here's the things we can control, and some of it will be beyond our control, and some of it say we can control, and where do we begin those conversations? That is the heart of this. So, and if we're particularly getting into what are the kind of essential building blocks, what's the essentialism? Well, it turns out position is the root of everything. Do you have access to your positions and shapes? Then it doesn't matter if you're rucking or you're sprinting or setting a world record or playing volleyball, it's ultimately the same shape over and over again, just repurposed. So we're not looking for, we don't empower people to do the PM. We don't empower people to understand how they work. We just say, work really hard, and as long as you got another kilo on the bar or you went a little faster, that must be better. So it's a real fundamental change in who owns what and what do we expect, and why don't you know this already?
Well, I think it's interesting the way that you've defined mobility, because you talked about just here putting your body in certain shapes, but there's a second component of that, which is putting your body in these shapes in the normal activity in your normal routine, and not having to create an event in order to get yourself into that position.
Really well said. If we look at, I think in the 24-hour duty cycle, look, I was at the Marine Aviation Weapon Tactical School, MOTS, and I'm like, all right, let's talk about tissue health. I'm like, who slept 6 hours last night? Not a hand goes up. I'm like, who slept less 6 hours? And I was like, there you go. It's all bullshit from here out. So we're seeing a lot of
I would love to get 6 hours. I got 6 hours.
I'm like sleep more. Good talk. Thanks. I'll be taking questions in the hall. The key here is as you're saying, recognizing that one of the mistakes is that we're adding things to the complexity. So I'm like, now you have to do this other thing. And the problem is, what are you going to give up for that? Are you going to give up hanging out with your family or your friends or being a human? Or are you going to become, are we going to track you 24/7 and you're doing a stressful activity with your friends, you need to come down. There's a reason that all the players organizations in professional sports don't want continuous monitoring. They need to be off, they need to be human. So what we need to do is figure out a more dense way of respecting people's time, so when they're on, and when they're off, they're off, and we don't have to give them a laundry list of more stuff they need to do. That means we need to look at our systems and rethink what the environment looks like and what we're asking people. How do I get 7 bottom lines out of a single practice or single behavior? That is the behavior change and real the magic. As you're saying, it could be as simple as, hey, in the evening, why don't you sit on the floor instead of sitting on the couch? Now, and when you need to fidget. So now you got 20 or 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour of sitting on the floor, long sit, side saddle, 990. That's one thing you don't have to do later on.
Right.
And
how's that different from stretching, right? Because you
I don't know.
About
so let me stop you. Hang on a second. Define your term, stretching, sir.
Well, that was my question to you, because
what do you think? What do you think stretching means?
I think stretching.
Let me ask you this. Stop. Hold on. Do you stretch? No, you don't.
Well, I stretch in terms of, so I used to stretch in the static way, right? Get your arm above your head, grab something, pull. But I've started to do more like mobility in that, like I'm doing
what does mobility mean
low range.
What does mobility mean
exercises.
to you?
Mobility to me is my ability to move my body in a way that's going to loosen my muscles, right? So before I do an actual workout, I'm doing a series of squats or lunges, but in a slower range of motion, maybe at a deeper range of motion, but trying to create elasticity before I actually work out.
So you just think by going slower than exercising. So what you've seen is we stepped into a whole bunch of rakes without knowing, because we haven't really defined our terms.
Sure.
And that means, so when we talk to athletes who say, well, do you stretch? Here's what equivocally, people do what works and they stop doing what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so if you work in a military community and you're working with a bunch of people who, honestly, all of the smart kids I work with in the military are the best in the world at learning a skill. And so they're presented with all the best teachers, a lot of really good teachers, And the soldiers I work with are really good at saying, that will never work, that will fit,
Yeah.
I can learn that.
Yeah.
And what we've seen over the last 15 years of working in these communities is that people see bullshit, and they see these real special systems that come in that aren't practicable or not deployable, don't give results. So when we say things like stretching, people don't stretch because it doesn't work, or it doesn't give them the results,
Yeah.
or it's so mismatched. And underneath that, we haven't defined what normative range is. So, look, I don't care if you have the gymnastic ability of a 16-year-old Olympian.
I don't. I'll tell you that right now.
Cross that off. But what is normative hip range of motion, and why don't we have those minimums? You know what your blood pressure should be? What's decent blood pressure? 120 over 80.
Yeah, okay.
You know
I was
what
going to
you're-
say 110 over.
Yeah, right. So it's 170, right? Or 120 over 60. You're realizing you're like, okay, 120 over 80 is this kind of average blood pressure.
Yeah.
What's a decent range of motion for your hip?
What, in a degree?
You don't know.
I have no idea.
What would be a decent range of motion in a movement using your hip in a flexion position?
Until it hurts.
Until it hurts. So
That's what I'll give you.
what we've done is we've stripped out the components out of training and movement. So let me remodulate. So because this will help you to wrap your head around what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
One is mobility, means I need to have the raw tissue extensibility. I have just the mechanics available. I'm not stiff. I'm not neuroprotective. Whatever the mechanism is not allowing me to do that. And second, do I have the skill to manage these tissues, right? Bench pressing is I need to have enough extension of the shoulder, enough internal rotation of the shoulder, create stability, and I need to do it and not flare my elbows and look like a noodle under the bar, right? So at some point, do I have the range of motion? Do I have the technique? So what we saw for a long time was that people would do a lot of skill transfer exercises, corrective exercise, which is all, again, towards you don't know how to move. But meanwhile, your hip capsule's stiff, you don't have any internal rotation. Now, these systems, of course, work together. But what we've tried to do is say, hey, look, let's establish what normative ranges is, or that every physical therapist, every doctor on the planet agrees this is what your hip should be able to do. And if you can't do that, let's just get you back to baseline.
Right.
And by the way, expressed in movement looks like this. It means that you can squat hip crease below the knee with your feet straight and take a breath there, and it doesn't hurt because it shouldn't hurt. And but B, you can do that without having to compensate around the problem. Now we have a language where you can be like, oh, I'm feeling a little stiff today, or a little behind, or hey, I've been sitting in a vehicle, or I've had to fly on an airplane, and all of a sudden you don't have access to your hip extension. You could work on that if you knew what to look for. Right. And we've been basically asking people to take care of their bodies, but making them fly blind the whole time.
I'll tell you, I mean, this came up. I was telling you, I was in California a few weeks ago with Jason Khalipa, and we do.
Sorry,
we do our interview, and then we go. We're getting ready to work out. We do a 6-minute workout, which, by the way, smoked me for the next week. And before we do it, he takes one look at me, and he says, "No, stop. You need to do these 2 exercises to loosen your hip." Because you're not going to be able to perform these exercises in the way that you need to.
So what we
I didn't even do anything. I was literally walked over to him.
And the key here is the pattern recognition is that I have this correlate movement language of you walking around or having access to your shapes. And he was saying, hey, can't just be about output anymore. It's not about who can work the hardest in this second. We sold that for a minute, and that was
what was in my mind.
No one was working very hard. And no one was very fit. So no one's strong, no one's fit, no one's very skilled. So we're all protected. But that ship has sailed. Yeah. And, throw in a little psychological drama. I'm working out with a world champion. I'm working out with Jesse Kleep, who's a mutant. And all of a sudden you're like, you get self-conscious. Even it doesn't matter who you are, suddenly you're self-conscious. And you're worried about now looking like a fool. You're not worried about, do I have enough range of motion in my hip, right?
Right.
So
the only concern I had was not being embarrassed.
Very reasonable. I get embarrassed by my wife and all my friends all the time. But what suddenly we have now is this notion that if position is the thing, then I'm using exercise and training to challenge position. Then I can say, well, what are the different conditions under which this position should remain robust? And when I say position, I have to be able to access it and I have to be able to control it. Can you do it under load? That's what most of us think. Make it heavier. Let's challenge again. Squat, heavier. Squat and bench, and then eventually you start cheating and right.
Yeah, because it's about the weight now.
What happens if I add speed to your load? So suddenly I can really find out how well you can control that if I add a speed component to it. In fact, speed is the great arbiter. You can do a lot, get away with murder at low speeds, and high speeds kill. Speed is the sport of position. What happens if I make you breathe hard and do that skill? Now run up these stairs, then administer the IV. You're going to fall apart and be a hot mess. What happens if I put you under a little cardiorespiratory demand, metabolic demand, a little psychological stress? Pretty soon what you see is I have 1,000 ways to challenge your ability to put your arms over your head, or carry this, or not deflect your back, or not turn and jump like an idiot, right? And ultimately, when we start to view training that way, it becomes very intellectually interesting. I'm challenging my position and the limits of my skill under these conditions. But Jason just was like, hey, I don't think you can access position, so what are we getting? We're getting you being able to say, you know what, I can go until I break, as long as it doesn't hurt,
right? It's
good. But what we have end up there is people who might as well, like, let's not train. Let's just get you on an exercise bike and hook electrical stimulation to your muscles. What we see is we have skills that don't transfer. And what we told everyone 15 years ago, 20 years ago, was that strength is never weakness, right? That as long as you're super fit, you're fine. And I'm like, is that the truth? Because I've had plenty of technical people who fall apart under a little load, and really strong people who are stiff and get tweaked because they can't change direction or step over or carry something or do it long. So ultimately, when you start to view that, here are these root positions, this is what everyone does, then if you're training overhead, there's 1,000 ways to get there. You want to hang? Great. You want to do handstand push-ups? Great. You want to do downward dog? You want to swim? They're all overhead positions. You want to jerk? We can snatch and get there, or we can press and get there. There's so many ways to get your arms over your head. What's normal overhead? Well, it's over my head, and now my back looks like a noodle, and my elbows are flared, and my neck's doing weird stuff. So
and my shoulder's pinching.
Totally. And when we begin to simplify the system, then suddenly everyone knows the rules. And what we're doing then is training. It's real training that transfers more effectively. And then we do test. I'm going to put you under, we're going to go compete. And we're going to see how well your skills hold together. If the only thing I do is shoot a straight target, and then I got to run up one day and shoot the target, I'm going to fall apart.
Yeah, because you haven't trained it.
Why are we thinking the body's mechanics, skill, technique is any different than any other skill?
Yeah. Can I ask you about this? So there's a term, operator syndrome. And you're laughing, so you've heard of it.
Operator.
But we've had a number of conversations, and we've done a number of episodes specifically on operator syndrome. It comes up in a bunch of different.
I don't even know what operator syndrome is. So let me guess. You're a mutant, and you can do anything until you can't.
No, it's the opposite. It's operator syndrome. So we had Dr. Chris Free. Dr. Chris Free has come on. He's a good partner of ours on the podcast. But he has developed this term, operator syndrome, leader kind of in the medical industry, pushing it. But it's where you have over time pushed yourself too far, right? So it's not one day, it's a career of too much load on the body, mentally, physically, lack of sleep, no rest, where you've constantly said, as you did earlier, that we can continue to go till we break, and then we say, well, I don't need any rest.
You should deploy to Yemen with your testosterone to 200. That makes total sense.
But then what happens is guys start going in, especially, you call it operator syndrome because his work's specific to special operators. But we've seen this in like Naomi Osaka. You could put into this from tennis. You could put it in Simone Biles.
Strain to strain.
Where you wake up one day and you're like, I can't do this anymore. And then you suffer from depression. You suffer from anxiety, lack of sleep, suicidal tendencies.
This is a failure of the system from the start. It's not on the individual. Everyone is a product of their system. So if you see someone who's gone that far, it's because no one has said, you're redlining again, your performance is crap, you don't know, and you didn't take care of these things. What we said was, we'll go till we break. And how's that currently going? It's not going great.
No, it's not going well.
One of the things that I ended up specializing in is helping athletes at the end of their careers extend their careers in the NFL and Tour de France and basketball. Do you know how hard it is to beat someone who's playing in the NFL for 10 years and give them another 3 years? They know every trick and have been playing in the NFL for 10 years. So why are we losing some of our best soldiers to back pain when we think it's preventable? or largely manageable if we begin to say first practice. And by the way, all the things you're describing, as you said, Naomi Osaka, some of the superstar athletes who are dealing with this pressure, it's no different. Just take war, and what we'll say is there's less we can control, less in war. You're going to get a flight meal, which is a little Debbie snack cake, right? And an MRE. And you get one MRE for the next 24 hours. Sweet, you're killing it. So the sleep is we can't control. There's some of the nutrition we can't control. What we realize is when we begin to control and put first principles first in a cogent way where, again, everyone knows the rules, what ends up happening is, believe it or not, we get more work out of the individual. We're ready to go again. I've worked on places where they'd love to have a rotation of 3 groups, a red, green, and yellow, and they don't have enough people to do that. So you're either on or you're off, and on you're off, and you never get a time to come down. So what ends up happening is in the short term, we get work done. In the long term, now you have one team.
Right.
So at some point, I remember sitting at a lunch with senior Army or senior Navy Special Forces, leadership. And one of the things they did was start assigning a dollar value to everyone they worked with. So it cost you $1.6 million in training. Absolutely. You're out with a hangnail. You're out because your shoulder labrum was done. We've just taken that asset off the table. What's a $1.7 million asset gone? And then suddenly people start caring about it. When we start realizing...
a business would never allow you to do that.
No. When we start applying those first principles to that thinking, and we start earlier in the pipeline, we start earlier in high school, we start earlier in middle school, then suddenly what we realize is, we thought we were performing at a high level. We were JV.
Right.
We can get more work done, have better decision making, and better durability, and girls will stick around longer because they're getting the best care and they feel better. So there's a lot to untangle there, but it seems like it's a worthy task for ourselves.
How do you educate at the junior level, though? Because I think it's one thing to have these conversations at an event like this at Sandlot Jax, where we have so many elite athletes, or even in special operations, which the mentality of this in special operations is only, I'm thinking back now, 10 years old at most, where we actually have really started to dig into this functional fitness attitude, because it was forever.
Everyone comes from
3
somewhere.
times 10.
Yeah, we didn't know.
But has that trickled down levels into youth sports?
So the key here is to think about this as, what's our performance environment? So my wife and I in our business have adopted an idea that came from E.O. Wilson, the evolutionary psychologist, right? Who said, the highest calling of science is to inform the humanities. We think the highest calling of sport is to transform society, transform community. Which means we need to take those lessons of high performance. We understand how much sleep and warm up and cool down and nutrition and psychology and readiness and all of that is required for high output. Now let's apply those things back. And it turns out it's first principles. What's the revolution in performance nutrition right now? Whole foods. Eating apples and actually eating a turkey sandwich is better than slamming a shake in 100% of the time, because the system is complex, but there are these foundational behaviors. So going out and working out at Fort Bragg with a group there, sleep problems in the military, they're kind of a big deal, maybe you know.
Yeah, a little bit about
One of the things that this group did was immediately assign people who had a sleep problem a band to track their activity. And the first order of business is to go ahead and start to increase the number of steps a soldier takes. Why? Because number one, we need to decongest and do all that movement, not smash ourselves and rest, right? Xbox, but we need to accumulate enough non-exercise activity that you actually fall asleep. So think about the last time you carried a pack in a scary place and you hadn't slept for 3 hours or slept for 3 days. When you sat down, did you have a problem falling asleep? No. You black out.
No, you fall asleep in the truck on the way home.
You have to. If you won't be needing me, I'll be shutting down now.
Right.
So one of the things that we can then do is say, we learn this, that if we can accumulate enough non-exercise activity, and that might be for you because you're ADD and crazy, 14,000 steps. That means I need to configure your day where there's more non-exercise activity movement in there so I can untangle the sleep problem. We need to look at, are you a fast caffeine metabolizer, yes or no? We all live off of caffeine.
I drink coffee all day long.
Well, it turns out caffeine may interrupt collagen synthesis. That's a problem if I'm trying to protect your tissues. But that caffeine you have at 4 o'clock, because that's when you need the bump because you didn't sleep last night. Now interferes with the quality of sleep. You fall asleep, but you don't sleep. And so now we're in this.
My Whoop is crushing me.
We're in this stimulant depressant cycling. And in the military, it could be Adderall and Ambien. Welcome to Adderall and Ambien. You're nodding your head because you're like, okay, I get it.
Adderall and Ambien.
That's right, and it is. And if you're listening to this, you're like, that's ridiculous. I only drink caffeine and red wine. You're like, okay. Right. So what we see is that's I start to have a hard time understanding what's what. Mm-hmm. If my daughter, I have 2 daughters, and we have a hard stop on tech. Phone's out of the room, you got to go to sleep. We protect their sleep, and we sidestep 100 other things. So it's about controlling what you can control when we can control it, and then you're durable enough to manage the rest. Right. So, for months at a time, you can be a hot mess, come back, and then we can actually talk. But what we see is we end up carrying those behaviors over. So that's how we start. Any of the conversations that I should have with any elite person trying to perform at a high level in an austere environment or not should be things they learned in middle school. And they're like, I know this already. Now make me snatch more. Like that's the conversation I want to get to, not this basics. And, the key here is that we've been doing this long enough that a lot of lieutenants are now captains and majors. And they're starting to change the system because they're like, we cannot eat this way. The fights to get a deep fryer not installed in someone's kitchen in someplace, how do we have fruit instead of pie? How do we begin to have people recognize Air Force is doing a great job? They're starting to really realize we need to look at how people are eating and train people to eat. Why aren't we training people to eat, sleep, self-mobilize, deal with pain the same way we're teaching you to be able to do these complex tasks?
I mean, nutrition, I think, I don't think people put enough stake in nutrition and the effect that really actually has on you.
We messed it up. What do we do? We're like, this sashimi chicken breast is health. And we're like, is it really? That
Chick-fil-A is so good.
Sashimi chicken breast. You've got this brown rice and broccoli. I'm like, that is a meal we give to the dogs. Right. You know what I mean? Like, not a lot of micronutrients in there, not a lot of connective tissue and collagen. You're right, though. One of the things that we see is there are foundations. Do you eat a fermented food? Are you getting 800 grams of fruits and vegetables? You need that micronutrients and fiber. Do you hit your minimum protein macros? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. Notice I haven't said keto or intermittent fasting. Yeah. I'm like, let's hit these basics around fuel and tissue health. Because, again, what you're seeing is that all of these systems interfere or affect these other systems. So I can't talk about your pissed off elbow if you're, smashing a Red Bull or a Monster, eating a balance bar, packing a chew to go do your job. And what we realize is those are coping strategies that you developed. And until I replace those with some other coping strategy, those will remain your coping strategy. You solve that problem for yourself. Right. I know how to go. I know how to get myself ready. These are the things I do. It turns out it's the short game.
Well, I joked earlier about Tom Brady, but I mean, what's your assessment of a guy like that who's been able to perform at this level? And his attitude is very much in line with what he consumes.
I think that.
I'm from Boston, so
forgive me, everyone. If you read what I'd say around his book, for example, what he has shown, he's very sophisticated. Whether you need to eat certain foods at certain times of the year, we'll that guy's not just massaging his biceps and then playing the NFL. We'll put it that way. Right. But what I'll say is, if you go to the back of his book and read the principles, they're solid principles. Yeah. There's no air. They're airtight. So what I think when you hear him, what he said was, "Hey, eating a certain way made me feel worse." Great, we believe you. He started eating in a different way and he started to feel better. Great, I believe you. There's enough individuality, but guess what? It's not about limiting fruits and vegetables and not eating fiber and right. I mean, so within the principles, there's specialization or tweaking. But the other thing is that I think he discovered a long time ago, why is someone training me to like this middle linebacker or this lineman? It doesn't make me better at my job. So suddenly, you're going to go be knocking down doors for a few months? Let's put 10 pounds on you. Oh, you're going to be hiking in the hills, carrying your back for 3 days? Let's take 10 pounds off you. Right. Suddenly, we realize that we can train everyone not to be just the biggest, strongest. Dude, if we want super soldiers, let me introduce you to Tren. Let me introduce you to HGH. Here's testosterone. Here's some growth stacks. Like, we could, the super soldier serum exists out there. We're just not willing to like actually play that game. But again, what we think is, man, why are we, I've been in some of these rooms where I'm like, why are you working on a heaving snatch balance on a force plate? You can't even take a breath in your arms over your head or put your arms over your head, and we're measuring a lot of dirty data.
Right.
Because it smells like sophistication. I don't even use the word tactical athlete anymore. I'm like, an athlete, we can actually control for some of the variables. You are a war fighter, which means it's basically a bar fight hungry.
Yeah.
Like, how do I prepare for that?
I want to ask you about the Ready State itself and the mission of the company. And there was 3 components to this mission. The first one is it's impossible to reach your full potential if you're in pain, stiff, and tight. Can you talk a little bit more?
Those are different things. So first of all, if we just take the pain piece off, pain is a low bar, believe it or not. Initially,
it's even lower for some people.
That's right.
like my 12-year-old daughter.
That's right. And what I'll say is, let's review. Let's change the narrative around pain. Resting state of the human being is pain-free. Mm-hmm. So let's use pain as a diagnostic tool, as an indicator that my brain is asking me to care for something. So if I want to sensitize you, I'll make you hypohydrated. I'll put you in a stressful situation, and I won't make you sleep. And then I'll touch your shoulder and be like, "Oh, it hurts."
Get off me.
Yeah, that's right. So what we can begin to think of is if you and I go smash a bunch of pizzas and drink some beer, and then we go show up and suck tomorrow, we're like, yeah, we smashed a bunch of pizzas and ate some beer. It was so great.
I'll show you the video from the Chad 1000X this morning.
Chad
Because we had
1000.
pizza and beer last night and did it with Starrett Wilkinson this morning. And the video doesn't lie.
It does lie. And what we can end up doing, though, is we begin to see a relationship between behavior and output. So what if I said your wattage, your poundage, your time, and your pain were all equal? Then when your knee was sore after a run, you wouldn't panic. You'd be like, oh, I need to pay attention to this. My brain is asking me for a behavior change, which may mean I'm hypohydrated or I'm stiff or I'm just sensitized. So we can begin to say, hey, let's think differently about pain instead of let me cover it up with bourbon and ibuprofen, which is what we did. And don't get me wrong, there's a big boy, big girl time for that, where I'm like, it's time for you to just take this pain pill and go do your job, and we're going to work this out afterwards.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. We're still doing this. But again, what I'm saying is we're actually not getting the most out of you, or the most number of years, or the most number of missions, or the most number of, you can actually feel better and do your job better. That's our hypothesis. We're leaving capacity on the table. So, but if you're in pain, you can't generate as much force. You don't have as many movement solutions. You're going to make bad decisions, and you're going to start self-soothing with whatever you have available to you. And that's going to be ibuprofen, Ranger Candy, I think they've called. Candy, right? You're going to reach for opiates. You're going to reach for whatever you have until someone gives you a better solution. So the first order of business is, hey, we think that unless your pain is so bad that you can't do your job or occupy your role in your family, that's not a medical emergency. You can get help for it, but you should be able to start taking a crack at this yourself.
Well, what happens when you're desensitized to the pain, though? Like you've had this level, injury for so long that you don't know anything else. So then how do you actually understand?
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to feel like this anymore.
Well, so again, when we're talking about chronic pain and persistent pain and how the brain changes, what we need to be thinking is, okay, complex system. So what's first order of business? Do you sleep? Show me. I don't believe you anymore. Let me see your whoop. You have a whoop on.
Yeah, you don't want to see my whoop. I can tell you, my whoop says go to bed right now.
That's right.
It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, I'm a parent. I'm a new parent. Thanks. My whoop's telling me I'm going to die. So the key here is we say, let's control what we can control in this moment. So then we have a system that's ready for remodeling. One of the easiest things to do is to begin non-threatening input. We change your breath. We change some mobilizations where we can change the tissue quality. We can change how the mechanics of the tissues work. And bigly, mostly, is that we're able to change. I said bigly. I've never said that in my life. I don't know why. And we can change how your range of motion, how much success. So I can change. A lot of times what people forget is that pain and movement are mapped in the brain. And eventually, when it's a chronic pain or persistent pain situation, I don't even need the movement. Something that looks like the movement, and the brain's like, I know what that is. Let me just save you the effort and perceive this as pain, as threat. So when we change your movement patterning, what we end up doing is have an opportunity to lift that needle out of the groove and put it down in a pain-free or a new, and the brain is clever enough to say, oh, that's different. That's a different position.
Right.
You're now winding your shoulder up before you bench press. You're not flaring the shoulder forward. So one of the things that we can do to begin to untangle this chronic pain, persistent pain problem is first principles. Show me you're eating 800 grams of fruits and vegetables and getting enough protein. Show me you're getting some collagen. Are you walking? Are you sleeping? Are you decongesting? Do you have normal range of motion? Full range of motion? Why not? Let's just start and you don't need a doctor to tell you those things. That's the stuff that you should know already because you came through middle school.
Yeah. So the second part of this mission is you work with elite. Your work with elite athletes serves as the proving grounds for these methods, and that builds on what you just said. Is that you don't need all this fancy equipment. You don't need all these high profile trainers to be able to do this. This is something that every person can and should be able to do by themselves.
That's right. And the problem is we've never said how when your knee hurts or when your shoulder hurts, what do? We haven't given you a template for that. Think about like if you had one of those old Grammys, it was like, oh, your knee hurts. Like she had some stuff to do, like rub this liniment in, do this thing, right? Put your elbow in this Windex, like whatever your crazy grandma did. But we have basically said pain is a medical problem. So who owns it? It's not so bad. I'm going to see a doctor. I'll just suffer through it.
Right.
I'm not going to see a physical therapist. I don't have time.
Hopefully it'll go away.
It'll go away. It's gone away in the past, right? Instead of saying, hey, what are you doing? How come you don't know how to self-soothe or manage this or take care of your tissue health? And that's why we care about sleep and we care about nutrition and hydration, because if you have piss-poor protoplasm, really tough to understand what's going on.
Right.
So that we have tried to say is we have a model for how people move it. It's a model for explaining complex movement behavior that we can explain why we're using these techniques. There's a reason why all the rigs are set up to bring your elbows in and create extra rotation, because that's a more stable position to shoot. Right? So you suddenly understand, you're like, holy moly, when some of the postures and positions that we teach actually reflect the physiology. I'm like, yeah, that's called throwing a shot put or throwing a discus or benching. The way we do one thing is the way we do everything. Body is principally driven. So we test our model that explains why we move the way we move. It also predicts why you're going to be able to not move or be able to do something, and we can communicate that. That comes out of our human performance lab. That comes out of working with every branch of the government, working with hundreds of universities, all the Olympic teams, the All Blacks, the British national soccer team. We just keep testing our model, helping people solve their problems in their own community.
Yeah, and the third component of the mission is so people can do it for themselves.
Right. And that's what we feel like is that, let's ask the question, how's it going? Are we doing better or worse? Are there less injuries? There's less musculoskeletal? No, it seems like it's accelerating. So our traditional ways that we've handled some of these things haven't served us the way we intended. So guess what? We're clever. We have thumbs. Let's go ahead and pivot that. And partly right now is I'm trying to help people have an operating understanding of how their body works. That's been very subversive. And then simultaneously trying to empower coaches who are experts in movement to be able to say, if your shoulder hurts, talk to your coach. And your coach is like, here's 10 things we can do that we don't need to get involved with a medical person. Right. It's just pain. It's not a medical problem. You're going to bench and do pull-ups today no matter what. And then simultaneously, we can use that training session as a diagnostic. How am I feeling? Well, go ahead and carry a pack 100 miles and then come back and let me know how well you move. You know what I mean?
I don't move.
And I learned some of these things the hard way. I've been a tourist on a lot of Army bases, a lot of military bases, where I get to do a lot of stuff where I'm like, oh, I've been strapped to this guy in the back of a C-130 for 4 hours, and now I feel like crap, and I haven't been able to drink anything, and I couldn't warm up or activate my glutes. So you become a realist about saying,
you can't drink water because then you have to pee. And
I know. So where are we going to control these things? And that really is a conversation, because people are durable, and we don't have to get it right the first time. We just got to get it better tomorrow. Yeah.
Can you define the Supple Leopard?
Oh, yeah. So, two things. One is one of my favorite movies as a kid was Gallipoli. And, the young sprinter is talking to his uncle, and he's like, how fast are you going to run? And he's like, fast as a leopard. And I just like that. And that this young Australian kid. And then one of my friends who was a rad person, Andy Stump. I don't know if you've ever run into Andy Stump. Yeah,
I know the name. I know who he is. I haven't met him.
Andy was like, hey, Kelly. One day he's like, hey, Kelly, the leopard never stretches. And I was like, there's some type 1 errors in your thinking. You're not a leopard. And 2, that leopard has full access to its physical capacity. It can attack and defend at full physical capacity in a second. Can you? Now I got to warm up and open my hips, and get my, right? So I was like,
I don't know. Jason Khalifa told me I needed to stretch first.
So, I think what's interesting is what are my behaviors that allow me to maintain access and have movement choice and access to my physiology? Of course, warming up makes a difference. And, shifting your blood and feeling, the fighter pilots do a couple G prep turns. How am I feeling? How's the heavies of plane? They just put themselves under a little load. It's calibration for the day. Why aren't we doing the same thing? And we should be. And suddenly when you start looking at training that way, it's easy to do that. So Supple Leopard was this idea of like, let's give you back you're fucking awesome. You're a human being. Let's just give you your access back so that your world contains multitudes and is huge. It isn't a small, well, I don't do that, or I'm afraid to do that, because that's what happens. People's worlds get smaller and smaller.
Right. The virtual mobility coach that you've developed,
that's our app.
Recently, you got 1.3 million people.
We have
that's what I read. You tell me if that's true.
We don't quite have that many subscribers. I'd love to have that many subscribers. I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I know.
Back in World War II, ambulance.
We'd be doing it at your penthouse apartment.
That's right. What I'll say is we have a movement assessment in there that I think is pretty darn good, so that people can begin to understand what their minimums are. Right? They can begin to say, hey, how am I moving today? And then how do I restore that? And then our system can be dropped into anyone. So you speak Pilates, you speak yoga, you speak CrossFit, you speak Beaverfit. It doesn't matter. The universal language of human movement is strength and conditioning. So when I say push-up on every continent, everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
It happens. Everyone knows. When I say squat, everyone knows what I mean. So why don't we use that language? And it happens to be a perfect diagnostic language.
I want to ask you about habits. The Jedburghs in World War II, they had to do 3 things as core foundational tasks. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, and they had to be able to communicate. If they did these 3 things every day as core foundational elements, then their focus and their effort would actually be placed on more complex challenges that came their way because they didn't have to think about these things. I say that that's what set the conditions for their success.
Yeah.
And so I ask you, what are the 3 things that you do every day that set the conditions for success in your world?
Steak, cocaine. We're in Florida, right? So,
yeah. Freedom.
The first thing that I protect, first and foremost, is my sleep. And that means I protect it. And we're leaving I'm getting up at like 3 in the morning last few days because I'm on West Coast time. Can't control that. So I control what I can control. I'm not going to stress about it. Am I going to be my best athletic self this week? Possible. I went to bed at 11. It's my wife's birthday. And I had a margarita last night, right? And I slept, got up at 3 in the morning and slept 6 hours. Like, I can't be the best.
Right.
I can buffer that and be functional, right? So we protect sleep like it's our job. Second thing is, I think you need to walk around and move more during the day. I don't care what your training is. You just need to move more. And counting steps is a really simple way as an allegory or a metric for that. And partly it's because I need you to decongest your tissues. So, for example, your lymphatic system is the sewage system of your body. And your body makes about 3 or 4 liters of lymph every day, like that little fluid in the blister. All the cellular debris, all the things that are broken down, your joints, everything like that is drained through the lymphatic system, not through your capillaries. So you need to drive that sewage through the system so it can be filtered. It's muscle contraction that does that. Your lymphatics are built into your muscles. So if I contract, I move the lymphatics. If I'm sedentary, I don't move the lymphatics. So that congested heel cord is partly a problem of lymphatic drainage stagnation, right? Congestion. So if I can get more movement in, not only do I accumulate more non-exercise activity so you sleep, but I've also decongested. I have tissues that are ready to be handled and load. So we really look at that. The other thing is that I try to control getting enough fruits and vegetables and protein. Do you need, those are my 3 big ones. Can I get on a roller for 10 minutes in the night? That's pretty cool. And then you can start to drop things in as you have time or you have resources, and you start to see, if I look at the human being in a 24-hour duty cycle, right? You wake up, you go to bed as the bookends, then it really is a matter of where do I plug these things in that makes sense, right? How do I work on this? So, even today as I'm at the booth, just sit on the ground a little bit, right? That's how I'm going to work this out. I'm sitting on the ground. I'm trying to walk around a lot. And I'm going to control what I can control. Is this going to be a perfect training week for me? Nope, doesn't have to be. But I'm not going to shove a bunch of crap in my mouth here too. Right. I can say, well, I'm either going to fast a little bit, or I'm just going to eat these proteins. And I had what I've done today with grams is in fruits and vegetables, I've had a banana. Mm-hmm. I'm not winning, but I'm going to have an opportunity tonight to smash all the salad, right? Yeah. And all the fruits and vegetables. So those are the principles now that start to make durability a priority, and then we can begin to layer in all these other things.
Protect sleep, walk around and move more, fruits, vegetables, protein.
If you did those things, a lot of things get cleared up, and then we can talk about breath practice and down regulation. Yeah. We can talk about how to self-soothe, talk about getting hot or getting cold. What are the other tools available to me to help modulate those things? And then it's not that sophisticated. I think carrying a heavy backpack around is a cool way to load your spine and load your feet.
Yeah. The 9 characteristics of elite performance as defined by special operations forces sets the conditions for a lot of our conversations on the podcast: drive, resiliency, adaptability, curiosity, humility, integrity, team ability, effective intelligence, emotional strength. I think I got all 9. But it's always about action. And when somebody makes the decision to better themselves, what is the advice that you have for them to do one thing?
My doctoral work was looking at barriers to adherence. What keeps people from doing what they say they need to do?
Yep.
And any chance, so out of strength and conditioning, I know a lot about the way the body works in psychology, because even in chronic pain, because I work in performance. If you don't feel like you belong to the group, if the group dynamic is off, doesn't matter how fit you are, you're going to suck on the field and we're going to lose, right? And so,
absolutely.
Where do we talk about that? We're going to have to talk about that. If you don't feel safe, it's game's off, right? If you don't feel like someone has your back, it really matters. There's a lot of the drills and things that we do seem silly, but it's about ritual, human being stuff. So oftentimes I'm trying to constrain the environment so I don't have to make another choice. So here's a simple idea. Don't want to eat cookies late at night? Don't have cookies in the house.
Yeah.
It's that simple. You want to smash a bunch of cookies? Make sure there are a bunch of cookies in the house. I guarantee you at 2 a.m. you'll wake up and be like, wow, I might as well have a cookie.
You're right.
If you want your kids to eat more fruits and vegetables, cut up the strawberries and put them in the fridge in a little container. They'll eat strawberries. Present people orange slices for dessert, which is what we did in our family the other night. People smashed so many oranges. You know how many fat kids run around eating oranges? None.
Right.
Right? I mean, what are you going to OD kill? You had too much sugar in those oranges. Seriously, stop it. So if I can make a better decision without having to make any decision, that's a environmental constraint. That's what I'm doing. So I set myself up not to have a behavior that is better for me, where I don't have to make another choice. Yeah. And suddenly, if that's your key is meal prep, cool. If that means you need to get a dog so the dog forces you to leave the house and go for a walk, cool. If you want to drink water first thing when you wake up, have some water by your bed. Think about it in those terms so I don't have to summon my willpower. My environment is constrained for doing the right thing. If you want to mobilize at night, which is when we want people to do their soft tissue work right before they go to bed, put a roller next to your couch. And you're like, oh, hey, roller, I forgot about that. You know? And then suddenly what we see is rinse, wash, repeat. We have a lot of duty cycles where that behavior starts to make us feel better. And as soon as we start to conjoin behavior and outcome, then it's not an ask anymore, right? And it takes a while for some of these behaviors to set. But all of a sudden you're like, whoa, my back didn't hurt this week. That's cool. What have I been doing? Oh, exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah. But I didn't have to make a choice about it.
Right. And it didn't become a thing.
Oh, you know, and we think if I'm not doing a perfect practice, I won't do any of it. I think that's really reasonable, you know. Yeah. You know, for example, one of the things that we love is that we're like, stop rolling at the gym. You just don't have time. You have too many other things you need in the gym. Do a warm-up, practice a skill, learn something fun, mess around. At home, do your soft tissue work. Right. And in the last 10 minutes before you go to bed, I guarantee you nothing is happening. That's worth noting. You're on Facebook. You're snapping.
We get a lot of likes late at night.
Yeah, that's right. We you know, as my daughters are saying, you're snapping your hose on Snapchat. And you know, but what ends up happening is we found that if we had people just do 10 minutes, commit to rolling a calf or look at a body part that felt sore, explore something, 10 minutes. That's it. No, I mean, if you tell me you don't have 10 minutes, I'm telling you you're a liar. Last thing in the evening, not only did that add a breath practice in, get non-threatening input in, but also you will fall asleep faster and sleep better because you had that soft tissue input. Whoever got up after a massage was like, let's fight? No one. So let's massage you with a roller or a ball or something when it makes sense in your life to help you come down from the day so that we sleep again. And then suddenly, man, you get 5 days of that, or that's an hour of taking care of your soft tissues a week. And that was just free in the background. That's cool. Yeah. Well, it's all about behavior change. I mean, that is everything.
And it's in our hands, you know, and that's the biggest thing I think.
Yeah, we're drowning in tools for sure. You know, I think what we were asking people is saying, hey, if it's essential, how you want to deal with that essential piece is up to you. But quit playing the suicide cup game, like the drink where you take a fountain drink and you like it's Dr. Pepper and orange, and right? That's called a suicide, and that's what we're seeing as people's programs. They just bouncing around, and I can't tell what's essential. What positions are you working on? What energy systems are you working on? What ranges are you working on? What's your principle around your food? It's not. You're just I drink this 900 calorie coffee and I don't have to eat breakfast. Like, okay, right. So again, the simplification of first principles, then you can find the first principles that work for you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Kelly, I thank you for coming in here, joining me in the back here. It's also very fitting that we are in here and we have a Francis and a Kelly, and it's two dudes sitting in the back of a Land Rover.
Well,
so
Kelly Starrett is about as Irish as you get, and I'm a fourth generation Irish kid. My grandfather was a flight surgeon in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. My dad flew F-4s. My stepfather was so I feel like I'm kind of back at home. I grew up around a military base in Europe. I know what's up.
Yeah, that's awesome. If we were in Boston, I'm Italian, you're Irish, we'd have to fight now.
Well, we're gonna just everyone Northern Ireland. I'm gonna drink the Jameson. So
there you go.
I'm a Protestant kid.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, man.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast and Talent War Group contribute a percentage of all profits to Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the families of our fallen warriors. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.